Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. On Sunday, Cliff Omoruyi, can't say the name, but I know the game. He committed to the Alabama Crimson Tide. And let me just tell you this, okay? You talk about a team that is coming off a Final Four run. I said it during the season. I thought that Nate Oates overachieved with this team in 2023, 2024. Well, guess what? I thought he overachieved with last year's team. I thought this program was building for 2024, 2025. And if they are able to get Mark Sears back from the NBA draft process, if they're able to get Jaron Stevenson back from the draft process, not only do I think that they are potentially a team that is good enough to win the national championship, I think they might be the favorite. So let's go ahead and dive in who this kid is, what he means, what he brings to the program. Let me say this. Really talented player. So as I said, Cliff Omoruyi, 6'10", 6'11" center, played the last 4 years at Rutgers. And as I said, as the season wound down, there was a lot of speculation that this kid could, in fact, enter the transfer portal. Fifth-year guy, he's got the COVID year. He's kind of one of the last, the last group of guys that has the COVID opportunity. And so we hear that he might enter the portal even before the season. He's probably not an NBA player, but it doesn't mean that he isn't a very good college basketball player. And so you hear he's going to enter the portal. He enters the portal, and I think there were 2 or 3 schools that really thought they were in pretty good shape early. Then he enters the portal, and when I say early, I mean, maybe they kind of thought it would be a good idea for him to enter the portal and maybe made that clear to some of the people around him. But I bring it up because he enters the portal, and it just blows up. Before Calipari left Kentucky, Kentucky showed interest. Kansas showed interest early. But as I said, over the last 2 or 3 weeks, it came down to those 4 schools: Alabama, North Carolina, Georgetown, and Kansas State. But what was really interesting was over the last week to 10 days, it really felt like another North Carolina, Alabama head-to-head battle, and another battle that they won, okay, they being the Alabama Crimson Tide. So first of all, this is a very interesting thing that's kind of happening behind the scenes in college hoops that you got to be paying close attention to realize, okay? And Nate Oates kind of owns North Carolina, okay? You thought Duke was North Carolina's biggest rival? I think it's going to be Nate Oates here over these next couple of years, because think about everything that has happened over the last couple of years. First off, North Carolina, how did their season end as the number 1 seed in the West region this year at Crypto.com Arena in Los Angeles? It ended with Alabama beating and stunning North Carolina in that game. North Carolina wins that game. They're probably going to the Final Four. They're playing a Clemson team that they had already beaten earlier in the year. And so you lose to them on the court. By the way, you lost to them in like a double, triple overtime game 2 seasons ago, the season where you missed the NCAA tournament altogether. And then remember, it was about a year ago. Right now, Jaron Stevenson, a player originally from North Carolina, originally from Chapel Hill, picks Bama over North Carolina. He's basically the final piece of this year's Final Four team. Remember, Nate Oates, after the game against Carolina, says to him, and it was caught on video, he says, "Jaron, those guys over there at Chapel Hill don't have practice tomorrow. You do. Let's rock." So you have all this. And then on top of this, this is what was really interesting. Alabama has been getting the better of Carolina for a while. But what was really interesting was he actually took a visit to Carolina over these last couple days. And what was interesting to me is that if you follow any of the Alabama coaching staff on social media, they seem to make it pretty apparent that they believe that he was going to Alabama. Producer Matt, when you can, pull up Preston Murphy's tweet from the last couple days. Okay, so Preston Murphy, he is the lead Alabama recruiter, the lead Alabama assistant coach. He's had 2 or 3 tweets that look like the one that you see on the screen right now. That is Clifford, the big red dog, and the Alabama coaching staff tweeting about the big red dog, Clifford. I think the insinuation is pretty clear. That's our guy. even while Cliff Omoruyi was on campus at North Carolina. Preston Murphy is sending out these tweets. I mean, I was trying to think of the analogy to that. And I don't even know what the analogy is. You know, you're going on a first date with a girl, but she's, you know, Instagramming about her boy. I don't even know. But the Alabama staff was tweeting about this kid, sending out these Clifford the Big Red Dog tweets on social media while he was at North Carolina. And so he ends up at Bama. And so you look in the big picture. And as I said, I believe this starts to put Alabama in the conversation as maybe a national championship favorite, assuming that there's no surprises in the NBA draft process. Mark Sears comes back. Mark Sears is in the draft. Jaron Stevenson, the player I just mentioned, is also in the draft. And so there are still pieces that need to be figured out. But in the bigger picture, here's what you need to know. What Omoruyi brings, I can't say the kid's name. But anyway, you get the point. I'm going to say Omoruyi from now on until further notice, okay? But I bring it up because what he brings is the one thing that Alabama really doesn't have. And it was funny because it was right around this time last year that Charles Bediako surprised everybody. Everybody thought he was coming back. He ends up staying in the NBA draft. And the one thing that Alabama lacked all of this year was a true 7-footer, a true shot blocker, a true difference maker at the rim. They've had that throughout the Nate Oates era. They had it with Charles Bediako. They had it with Noah Clowney. They did not have it this year, and that's why you go back to what did I say all season about the Alabama basketball team. I said that I thought Nate Oates actually overachieved with this roster, having them in contention until the final probably week to 10 days for an SEC regular season championship, and then obviously going to the Final Four. And so now you start to look at who could come back if Mark Sears, if Jaron Stevenson come back. It's hard for me to see a better team in college basketball in 2024, 2025, okay? Because you look at the roster. Mark Sears is a dog, okay? And I remember, I was at the Final Four, and I remember being in that UConn locker room after the Alabama game. They basically said, like, we haven't seen anybody like that all year. Averaged 21.5 points per game, 24 against UConn. And you could tell, like, there was a weight off their shoulders after they played Alabama because they were like, we had no answer for Mark Sears. It's funny. I think I've said it on the show, but you could kind of tell Alabama was the game that UConn felt like they had to get through. I think you could see in the locker room that they were pretty confident that once they got through Alabama, they were going to take care of Purdue. So Mark Sears is back. You have the shooting with Latrell Wrightsell, who, of course, was injured, banged up in and out of the lineup this year. And especially late, he had some concussion injuries, frankly. He's back. You added another shooter in this kid, Chris Youngblood, a player from South Florida. Houston Millette, a player from Pepperdine. So you add shooting. You have now Grant Nelson at the 4, Jaron Stevenson at the 3. You have a true low post center. And I start to look at it. What don't you have? But here's the crazy part. Not only do you have one of everything, it's like Noah's Ark. You got 2 of everything at Alabama. Because remember, Aiden Holloway, former McDonald's All-American, transfers in from Auburn. Now, if he's your starting point guard, he's got to play 32 minutes a game next year. I'd be a little bit worried. But if Mark Sears is back, Mark Sears is in charge, Mark Sears is running the show, then you have Aiden Holloway playing that 21, 22 minutes a game. It makes things easier. On the wing, you have all sorts of talent in that freshman class with Darian Reed, with Nas Cunningham. You have another McDonald's All-American. So you have 3 McDonald's All-Americans on next year's roster. Aiden Holloway, who I just mentioned, Darian Reed, and then Aiden Sherrill, a big guy down low, 7-footer, rim protector, etc. Not with as much experience as Cliff Omoruyi. And so you start to look around. What does this team not have? By the way, got yelled at by Bama fans the other day when I did an update on all the things that happened in the sport. I didn't mention LeBaron Philon, the freshman who was committed to Kansas, gets out of his letter of intent. He's headed to Bama as well. Really good guard that I think is a 2-3 year guy that can be a star on this team in time. And so you look at Bama with Cliff Omoruyi. I don't know what they do not have that you need. Look at this roster. 2 point guards, maybe 3 really. shooters everywhere, couple wings. Grant Nelson is now going to play his natural 4 spot. He doesn't have to play 5 and be going up against Zach Edey and Donovan Clingan and guys like that. You have 2 7-footers in Cliff Omoruyi and Aiden Sherrill. This is a deep roster. This is a talented roster. I'll tell you this. I think that people behind the scenes of college basketball, there's a lot of buzz with Kansas. I don't know if people have quite caught up with Bama yet, but I'll tell you this. I was talking to somebody who's kind of into the analytics stats kind of world, and they said to me on Friday, when we kind of thought this commitment was coming, this Bama team has a chance to be special. So the numbers back it up. The talent backs it up. Now you got to back it up on the court. And so we'll see what happens. But in an offseason where we've spent so much time talking about Kentucky, so much time talking about Arkansas, so much time talking about some of these other schools, even across the country, UConn, Kansas, whatever. You have a team that just made the Final Four, that basically returns everybody if Mark Sears and Jaron Stevenson comes back, and has loaded up in the portal with Cliff Omoruyi, with some of these other guys, with a 4-man freshman recruiting class with a bunch of studs. Alabama, in my opinion, is the number 1 team in the country going into 2024, 2025.